All right. And so this is another fantastic workshop. We have two amazing speakers for us today, Lisa and her partner, Chris. Uh, shoot. Chris, is it Chris? Oh my gosh, I think it is. Yes, okay, it is Chris. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, Lisa and Chris. Oh, it's right there. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Okay, so it's Lisa and Chris. They are two phenomenal people that have gotten through a fight, or well, not a fight in the desert. They got lost in the desert here at the Superstition Mountains for 10 hours, and how they use the traditions as life-saving tools for their relationship. And they're both going to share their experience, strength, and hope on it. Lisa has been of service to CODA at the world level and here in Phoenix, and she's just an amazing, amazing woman. So I would like to give them a nice warm welcome from our hearts, open up our hearts to them. And we're all cheering you guys on. We're all here for you. And I'm going to turn it on over to you now. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for such a wonderful intro. My name is Lisa. I'm a recovering codependent.
And I'm Chris J., also a recovering codependent.
You start us off. Oh, you tried your self-care.
Well, actually, I think Christina already took care of the housekeeping.
We're good.
So
She's
we're
good. He's good.
So a little bit about us. We have recently been brought together, which was definitely divinely inspired. I'm a Midwest boy from Chicago, and I've been part of programs for about 6 years now. And I recently started doing some world service and happened to go to service conference in Minneapolis, at which point I met Lisa as the moderator. Lo and behold, we crossed paths about a year later in San Diego at the next service conference. And that's when the two of us decided to follow the nudge from higher power to see where our relationship would go.
It's my turn to talk now?
Turn,
okay.
A little bit.
I've been in programs since 1989. Started in California, moved to Las Vegas for 20 years, and I met this really amazing guy from the Chicago area and decided to move across country and start a new life. And here I am. And so we've been embarking on a journey. And this particular day, Chris is going to start us off and tell you where we were at and what was going on. And let's get this show started. I'm ready.
So we had,
I can
no, wait.
Okay. Oh, it's being a boo-boo.
Yeah.
Hold on, we got it. We're not professionals.
There we go. Okay.
Yay!
So we had decided to take a little trip to Phoenix, and my brother is out there and wanted to introduce Lisa to him and his family. And we realized that in 2019, on Good Friday, it was going to be a full moon. And we thought, boy, what an opportunity to see a sunset in the mountains, and then an hour later, a full moon rise. And we both have an interest in outdoors and, you know, connecting with God and nature. And it was something that we talked about and decided to make a plan for that Good Friday. However, at 9 o'clock that night, we found ourselves in a very difficult position. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we got there. But 9 o'clock at night, We had been in the desert for about 7 hours. We had not had water. We had run out of water about an hour before, and we had not seen anybody since about 6 o'clock that night. The full moon had risen, but it was the desert. There are no streetlights in the desert. It's only the moon. And we had not seen a trail marker since we had left 2 o'clock that afternoon. It was the desert, and this was Good Friday. We were fortunate that weekend that it was still warm, that it did not, the temperature hadn't dropped significantly. But here it is, 9 o'clock, and we are both suffering from fatigue, exhaustion, and Lisa had some medications that she needed to be taking, but they were back at the car, at the trailhead. We were very definitely in a life and death situation. Some of how we got there, we'll talk about a little bit later, and how we got through it is definitely going to be part of this workshop. But every once in a while, you see these little questionnaires come up. What would you do if? The simple fact is that when you talk about a life and death situation, you can hypothesize and you can predict, but when you are actually in it, it all goes blank. You are left with who you are, all of your experiences up to that point, and what do you do to get out? And there's no amount of hypothesizing that prepared us for what we were in the middle of. One of the things that we share is a very core belief that codependency in and of itself is a life-threatening disease. You know, whether you turn to drugs or alcohol to survive codependency and all the health risks and the possible immediate chances of dying from bad drugs or an overdose or anything along those lines, codependency leading into alcoholism or drug use will kill you. And codependency leading to depression and suicide will kill you. And where I was when I hit my bottom, my spirit was dead. I was flat. I was just hanging on. I wasn't really living. I was spiritually dead as a result of my disease.
Which part am I doing now?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So for my own experience as a recovering codependent, when I came into program, it was literally life or death. I was ready to drive my car off a cliff over whom I affectionately termed the guide du jour. And I don't even remember who it was, but that's how desperate I was when I came to program. And it was, I think that's the word that is key for me, is desperation. There was a level of desperation in me as such that I was willing to do whatever it took to get better when I entered a recovery program. I came to CODA when I was 26 years old. I'm not 26 anymore, but at 26, I was a very broken, wounded woman. And I am intimately familiar with the fatal nature of codependency. And so for us to come together as a couple and have that shared value was really important to me, because he got it and we spoke the same language, and that was very important to me. So with that, we entered into this new relationship, and we decided to embark on this new journey with the 12-piece relationship toolkit. It was introduced at conference, the CODA service conference several years ago. It was a piece designed by CODA Canada, and we began the process of going through the questions. And the way we did it as a couple was we would separately answer the questions, and then we would come back together and share our answers and have times of discussion. And what I appreciate the most about the way we did it is we didn't try to blaze through and rush. We took our time with the questions. So sometimes in an evening, we might only get through one question, we might get through three, but we took our time to go through, and some questions inspired more conversation than others. But it was a very powerful experience for us. And with that, let me make sure where I'm at here. Yeah, we were, we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but we were able to develop a primary purpose within our relationship. And that would play a very significant role in our experience in the desert. And we look forward to being able to share more about that with you. So I'm gonna shift it over to Chris, and he's gonna tell you, oh, I guess that was our primary purpose? So I'm not a professional. Did I mention that?
Yeah.
One of the things that came out of us was that we developed the idea that there were three entities in the relationship. There's Lisa, there's Chris, there's us. The relationship itself is an entity. And we found that to be a very powerful realization in the work. And now I turn it over to you. Sorry, love.
No, it's this part actually was really interesting for me to go through. I have my own experience of failed relationships, and you know, I've seen it happen in my own life both ways. I've seen it happen where the relationship part was so small that there really wasn't an exchange or support coming from the relationship. There was no anchor there. And then I've seen it the other way, where the circles are so overlapped that it was hard for me to tell where I stopped and where she began. So this diagram, this Venn diagram with the overlapping circles, really visualized for us where the balance needs to be. Where, you know, when I'm struggling, the relationship helps me to anchor so I don't swing out way too far out. But then also I'm there and present to be of service to Lisa if she's having some struggles. So this Venn diagram became very important for us as we were doing this work, because Lisa has experiences that I was not part of. And the same holds true for me, that I had some experiences that she wasn't part of. But those are all experiences that were given to us by God. And they're all important, the good and the bad. Because if I learn the lessons from the bad, then I can let go of how painful learning it was and hold on to what helps me moving forward. Also, when we were doing this, you know, we had gotten to Tradition 5 and worked on primary purpose. And this was a turning point for me individually in my recovery, because I realized that I had not had a primary purpose for many, many years. You know, when I was in school, I had career aspirations, and I was on a track, and I was pretty well focused on that track of where I wanted to go with my life as an adult. I lost that opportunity. And, you know, for many years, I went by not knowing what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. there were times that I latched on to a woman in a relationship, and I was all into that relationship. And again, that was one place where I lost myself, and you know, I was faking my purpose. I was matching my purpose to someone else's without being clear of my own. So when we started working this toolkit, that was something that I did on my own to figure out what my personal primary purpose was. Because Lisa had shared with me that she had her own. And I asked her to wait. I said, okay, this is important. Let me do this for my own, and then let's come together and figure out what our relationship primary purpose was.
Do you mind if I add a piece to that?
Yes, please.
So the other piece that we did that I felt was important was to identify our values and to find out what values we each had and where the overlap was. And when we were able to do that, that also helped us to develop our primary purpose, which we will talk about, as I said, a little more in depth. But I found that to be an important part of the process as well. That wasn't necessarily part of the toolkit, but it was kind of maybe one of those higher power inspired moments that we utilized, and it really made a difference when we got to this particular tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, babe. Oh, you ready for the next one?
Yep, I think so.
The right one, yay.
Yep. So when we were going to Arizona, this is, it's called the Needle. And it is actually a pretty well photographed spot in Arizona, just a little bit east. And, you know, the hike to get to this, it's called Fremont Saddle. That is the vantage point to see this. And it's only about 1.5 miles from the trailhead. You know, you can, you know, 1.5 hours. I don't know what anybody else's walking time is. We knew that there was a little bit of elevation, but we figured 1.5 hours. It would give us, you know, some time to take it easy, get up there, get set up, and then, you know, we'd have the sunset right behind the Needle, and then we would be able to turn around and see the moonrise, full moonrise, come up just a little bit afterwards. So we were thinking fantastic pictures. I don't know how many of you who are international have a sense of the geography of Phoenix, but the desert, the high desert landscape has its own beauty. I mean, there is a starkness to it. You see some of the cactus here and the aloe vera. The grounds are, you know, very low and scrubby because they don't have a lot of water. But there is a beauty in this nature that is unique.
Ready? There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be another picture.
Yep. Now this little tree, there's actually only one tree that we saw the entire time there. One tree. And we had actually met a couple that had come up. They were a little bit younger than us, but they had the big backpack and they had their tent, and they were going to be hiking another 1.5 miles over to that tree because that's where they were going to spend the night. Mm-hmm. It turned out one of the things that we didn't have ahead of time was a paper map. So we thought there was going to be a ranger station right there, that we would be able to get hold of one. That's not what we found. We found a billboard, and this was the extent of the map that we had. If you zoom in, you can see a whole bunch of numbers. They have these little trail numbers all over this map. So we took our picture of it on our phones so that we had it. And we knew where we were parking and how the adventure was going to start. I was going to be calling my brother to let him know where we were, except we lost self-service about half an hour before we got to the trailhead. So I was unable to let him know where we were starting. Part of my experience is I'm an Eagle Scout. I have spent many, many weekends, weeks at a time, even out in the wilderness with a backpack, and there are things that you do in preparation. You let people know when you start and when you expect to be back. I wasn't able to do that today, on that day.
We did call ahead though.
Yep.
We did some research online to figure out where we wanted to go, where we wanted to start. And because of his experience, we actually called the ranger station and we spoke with the ranger and talked about the trail going up and the trail coming back down. And as a part of that conversation, that's what helped us to determine which trailhead to take up and which way to come back. We didn't come back down the same way that we went up. We were going back a different way that the ranger advised us would be less strenuous. It would take a little more time, but it would be less strenuous. And we thought that might be a good idea. So that's kind of what we went with. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we did preparation. We did some things that even I wouldn't have thought of. I wouldn't have thought to call a ranger station. I thought, wow, fabulous idea, you know? And the other thing was at the trailhead, we signed in. This is an important piece to the story, is they had this little book. And so we signed in what time and all of that. So though we couldn't call his brother, which I was actually quite surprised at the bottom of the trailhead that we had lost cell service already. We felt like, okay, somebody will know, you know, the car's there, all of that. So as Chris mentioned, we lost cell service. The difficulty of the trail was a little more strenuous than we expected. That hour and a half actually turned into 3 hours. It took us 3 hours to get up the hill. In addition, the projection of our water was not as accurate as it could have been. And so we wound up using more than 2/3 of the water that we had to get up there. So when we got to the top, we both had a sense that we were in trouble. We looked at each other and I remember saying it out loud. I said, I'm concerned about our water. And he said, yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had already been practicing tradition 2, group consensus. I mean, I was really hot on the idea of getting pictures of the moonrise, but I didn't want to force the situation. So you know, during the preparation, we had talked about that together. Were we going to do this? Yes. And then we decided some of the things that we
I'd
were
like
going
to
to do.
share
We were
about
going
the
to bring
group
the
conscience
tripod
process in my
so that we
life.
could have
Friend,
we wouldn't
codependent
have
named Christina.
to rely
Thank you
on,
so much for
you know,
sharing that.
balancing it on a
And
rock and
I
will it
see
be
such a
level?
different way of
No, we
putting my
wanted some really
recovery
good
into
pictures.
my,
So, you know, we had worked
well, using the
together
traditions into my
in
life just by
setting up the plans
being of
to
service
begin
and
with.
having to run a group conscience process
We
and running a group
also
conscience and getting
had,
that consensus and
you know,
directly
we
working with
talked
the
about
sponsor that suggests to me, why
the
don't I
lack of
just take
cell
a,
service.
I didn't even realize this
Because
was a group
actually
conscience,
we
but
did
like,
have
just
the
why
cell
don't you run
service,
that
and
past
we're
like
like,
4 people
that's okay. We're
and
just
just
going to
get
go up. We're going to be coming
the
back down. It's only
consensus
going to
and
be a
then make
couple
your
of
decision
hours.
after that. And I didn't realize I was
We actually,
really working a tradition
there
too
was one
all
little window
along,
as we were
and
walking
that's
up.
pretty awesome.
All of a
And
sudden,
you
both of us jumped out of
Lisa,
our
you're
skin
inspiring me to like
because
work
one of
this
our phones
toolkit,
just
and
started
I'm
blaring
like,
away.
hey, let's start a
Apparently, we
group.
had found a little
A little,
window.
why don't
And
we? I
like
don't know if
4
you're open
hours
to
of
that, but I want
messages
to,
came
I
beep,
mean,
beep, beep right at us.
freaking
So we shut our phones
amazing.
off. We didn't want the outside world
And
interrupting
how
our
we can apply
adventure.
these just to how I communicate. So let me see
And
here.
we got
So there's a
to
couple
Fremont
people that like
Saddle,
to share,
and it was very pretty, and we had some great pictures there.
Iris, do you want to share?
Well, you've seen a
I
couple
don't-
of them.
Hi, I'm
right now
Iris.
that
Am I in a
we've
group
taken
now? I
on the way
wasn't in the
up.
one I was supposed to.
Let's
No,
see, are
you
we
can
going up
share
to the
here.
next
Oh,
one?
We
okay,
can.
great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm Iris. I'm out in California. This is
So tradition
the
two
most
was
incredibly
actually really
apropos
kicking
topic
in,
for me today.
you know,
I've been
for us, you know, as
struggling
we were
with a
planning the
relationship
event
with a
and as we
girlfriend
were starting out
who
on
I've been
this
friends with for about
adventure.
10
This
years,
was,
and we're in a
we both
club
worked
together.
very hard
And
to
one of the things that we do
maintain
compatibly is
that balance between
cross-country
us.
ski and hike.
We were going to
And she and I
split
go out,
things evenly
drive up to
between
this
us.
lodge our club belongs to, and we
Neither
do
of
this,
us
but
were going to
progressively over
force
the
our
last
way.
3 years or so,
And, you know,
she's not in
when
any
we
program.
think about
And her
unity and
behavior
group
towards me
conscience in a
just kept getting worse
two-person
and worse.
group,
And I've learned a lot
you
about
know,
toxicity
when there's a
and
group
how I get involved with
of
toxic
you know,
people over
larger
my years in
numbers,
CODA.
whether it's 3
Bottom
or
line
13
is,
or
it feels
333,
like about 8, 9
you
months
know,
ago, I
there's
finally
going
just had
to,
enough. And so
when
I
you
had to
take
take care
that
of
group
myself.
conscience
I have
vote, you're
dissected
going to
this whole
find,
thing
you
ad
know,
nauseum with my
generally
sponsor, my
speaking,
therapist,
where the
etc.
majority lies.
And I'm very,
And,
very
you
clear
know,
that
following the group
although
conscious
it's a painful loss
procedure
to me,
in
I'd rather be
conference,
alone
there's
than be
time
treated
for
like that.
crafting, there's time for
One of the
evolving,
problems that would come up as it
you
relates
know,
to
a
this
decision
topic
before you take a
is
vote
we'd be
on.
out on some
And that's what
trail
we
in
found
either of
was
those
that even
sports,
though
and
it's
we
the
would
two
seem to
of
get
us,
lost.
when
And
we
she
talked
would
about
then
it,
get triggered.
we got ideas
And no
back and
matter what I
forth
would
that
say,
we
even if I
felt
checked my
was
GPS
higher
or
power
whatever,
helping us
she would
to see
ignore
things
it,
from
get in
different
this state of
perspectives
mind, block
and
me out.
come
There was
to
no discussion.
come to a
95%
better
of the
decision.
time, I was coming up with
And
a
so
helpful
where that would
suggestion
take
of
us
let's go
is
this way.
we were
And
at
it
the
was
top.
almost always right. She wouldn't
The
listen.
sun,
And
let me see,
there
we
was
left
no
before the
way
sun
to
went
get
down. We actually
into
left
a
the top
group
before the
conscience
sun
with
went down
somebody
because
who
we
doesn't
saw that our
understand
water supplies were
any of
low
this, who's
and we
not in
felt
a
like we needed to
program.
get going right away.
And
So
so
we
it got
actually
to
wound
the
up leaving
point
early.
where
We didn't get to see
I
the
would
sun
just
go
walk on
down
eggshells, keep my mouth
and
shut, let her do
kind of
her thing
bummed.
until it got to
We
the
also
point of
thought
I
that
can't
waiting for the
stand that
moonrise
either.
was not a
I'm
good
just like
idea
done.
either with our water
And that's
supply
just
so low
one of
because
her
it was going to be a
behaviors
little
towards
while
me.
before the moon came
So
up.
what do you
And
do
so we wound up
when you're
leaving at about
with
6,
somebody
6:15
who
in the
means a lot to
evening
you,
to
you have a
begin our
long
descent
history
down
with,
and around
but
the other way that the ranger had
here
talked
you
about with us.
cannot engage in group
And at
conscience
some
discussion,
point,
whatever we want to
we
call it,
discovered,
with someone who
this is a good time to
is
go over that?
triggered
Yeah,
with
that
whatever her issues
we
are. I don't know, and
were
I'm not
going
in her head,
away
and it's
from
not my
the area
business.
that we wanted to go,
But
not toward it.
it was a big part of the end of
It-
things. I just couldn't
it
stand it. She's a
was-
contrarian. Everything I'd
What we
say,
understood was it
whether
was a
right or
mile
wrong,
and a
it
half
would have
going
to be
up,
corrected
but it
or
was steep.
confirmed by her. So
And if we
I
went
guess group
forward,
conscience to me
it
would
was going to
cross
be
over
maybe a little bit longer,
to
2.5
anything with
miles,
her
but it
of a
wasn't going to be
two-person
as steep.
discussion.
So
And I still feel
the two
terrible
of
pain
us
of loss,
talked
but the bottom
about,
line is I can't
first, do we
seem to
want to
pick up
wait
the
for the
phone
sunset
to sort of
and the
politely
moonrise,
end this,
or do we
because to
want to
me
go
it's a
now? So we
fear of,
decided to go
finality.
now.
That's a whole other issue,
And
and
then we
loss, and
decided,
do I
then
take
we
crumbs and all
discussed,
other
are we going to go
issues. But
forward or are
in
we
this
going to go
context, if
backwards?
anybody, you know, I'm open
Because
to,
we knew
I
what
don't
the
want to
trail
call it
going back
crosstalk,
was.
but I'd be glad to
And it
put my
was steep.
number in.
I
And
mean, as
if
Lisa
anybody wants to
mentioned,
talk to me about some
it
ideas,
was
that's it.
challenging,
But I'm
an
gonna
hour and a half
shut up
to
and
do a
listen to
mile and
all
a
of
half.
what you have to say about
And
how you deal
I
with
generally am walking 4
two-person,
times
or
that
maybe even
pace.
more, you know,
So
difficulties
there
like
was
that.
definite
Iris,
strain
we're about time
in that
there.
path
We're
Yeah,
gonna
I
from
give,
just
where
finished.
our car
thanks,
was
honey.
to where we were.
Okay, so you have about 2
So
minutes to
the two
share.
of us
I'm
decided
in.
to move forward.
Christina, I
Hi.
can't time this
Hi.
because I'm in the 15 minutes, so if you can get
Oh, no,
Jeremy.
no, that's okay. I'm keeping
Now,
it.
the group conscience process,
Thank you.
Hi.
you
I'm a
know,
man. I'm a
it
codependent
is one of our
in London.
traditions.
Thank you for the
And
session.
this
It's
is
really
actually
insightful. So
one
I
of
was thinking
the
about
breakout groups that
group
we would like
conscience
to let you
in
guys
my
talk about,
life.
you know, the
I
group
really
conscience
struggle with
process
this.
and where it has
There's
worked
one close
in
relationship
your
I have
recovery.
with
We have plenty
my
of
mom, and I
our
think
own
this dynamic
experiences,
plays out with other people,
but sharing those
where
experiences where
it's
it has worked or has not
where
worked
when I
is
when I want us
important.
to make a decision
And we
together,
like
right? So
to
say
give you guys some
we're
time
gonna
to talk about it and share some of your
decide what
experiences
restaurant to
with
go
each other.
to, and she tells me, "I'll just go with what you want,
All
you
right,
know,
thank
or what you
you.
decide." And I feel really
Is
uncomfortable, you know,
Lori
because I don't
doing the
feel
breakout
like
room?
I then feel like I'm forcing my will on something that should be joint participation. And so then like I've become really uncomfortable with suggesting things. So I've kind of left it, you know, to when she's got plans with other people or things that are on her own, and like she wants to go to Italy for a pilgrimage, and that's like out of her interest, but I'm also interested in that same, you know. And then she's asked me and I've said yes. But I've really struggled with when you know, when somebody doesn't put their point of view, you get it, into a group conscience or into a decision, or they don't want to discuss it. Or also on the other side, when somebody's really forcing their will, and then I abandon myself because I think, you know, depending on how important it is, that, so I'm just really struggling with finding that middle ground, get it, between like over compromising and getting, you know, my entire wants. And I think it really is to do with communication, you know. And also I'm powerless over if some people think of, you know, this group conscience process as a confrontation and they don't want to participate in it. So that I also withdraw myself then, because it's like, how can I have a relationship where the person doesn't want it to be balanced? But yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and it's great to hear you both share your experience. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Lori, how much time do we have left?
6 minutes.
Okay, Mary, I'm gonna unmute you. You got 2-3 minutes.
Hi there. I have an issue with my former husband, and I've known him for like over 35 years. And the problem is that he has absolutely no ability to do group conscience. So we can't agree on times or agree on things. And I've been in the program for 7 years, and he has not been in the program at all. But he seems to feel that he's a spiritual person and a good person and all this, but he just doesn't have the skills. And it's so frustrating. It drives me around the bend. So I guess the only thing I can do is just detach and find a way to just stay healthy myself. But it's just not working, you know, and it never has. So it's painful. But he is my ex-husband, so they're exes for a reason, you know. So that's about all I feel that I can say. I have failed at this with this one person. That's it.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Anyone else? We have time for one more quick one. Lori, you want to share?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, well, we probably have a few minutes till they're going to come back.
Four minutes.
I don't see anyone else's hand raised, so.
Yeah, Lori Sky raised her hand.
Okay. Lori, you have just a few minutes.
All right, I just thought I'd chime in that I have I'm in the right, I'm obviously in the right place because I don't think I've ever used this. I think I'm new to to CODA, and I'm self-employed. I work alone. I'm single. Obviously because of my codependent issues is why I never got married. So it's really interesting to read this because I don't even have anyone to practice this with. That's how isolated I am. I have close friends, but I'm more of a one-on-one person with my friends than in a group of friends, if that makes sense. And I don't have coworkers, and I don't have, family. Most of my friends my age have like husbands and kids, and if I get to the girlfriend, we go out to lunch or something or have coffee before the pandemic anyways. So I'm just interested in learning and listening to everybody because it's starting to hit me that maybe that's one of my patterns is that I've purposely avoided group situations. Maybe that's why I was drawn to being a self-employed photographer where I can work alone, and how I thrive better by living alone. I think that's a lot to do with childhood trauma for my abusive family, but I have to learn how to work with other people. I'd like to finally settle down and have some sort of family. I'm not getting any younger, you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's really interesting to read this because this makes me realize I haven't done anything to work with others very well. So that's it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. You're in the perfect place.
Yes, exactly.
I can so relate to that for sure.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Hopefully we'll get a little group together to do this relationships toolkit. So
Yeah, it looks good.
in touch.
You have someone that raised their hand, Christine.
Do we have enough time?
Yeah, because I'm gonna let everyone back in, so we have another minute.
Okay. iPhone.
Okay, this is Brenda, and I just wanted to this is the first time I've gotten on one of these online, and it's been very interesting. And so I'm happy to be here and looking forward to hearing more. But I just wanted to just say I'm on my phone. I've never been on my phone. My computer wasn't working, so I didn't even know how to put my name in or anything. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Glad you're here.
Will you let me know when everybody's back in?
Yeah, another 26 seconds. They'll be back in.
Okay.
All righty.
One.
Okay, they're all here.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. So what we're going to follow up with is to have some shout outs from all of you. And we don't have time for everybody, but whoever's raising a hand at some point, we'll call on you to share a minute or two about maybe an experience that you had and to share about that. But we wanted to acknowledge that at this point, we don't have the time to be able to talk about all of the traditions and how important they are to relationships. What we made the decision to do was to pick the top
Well, two
two. We chose the top two
for the breakouts.
for the breakouts. But I think for the purposes of what we're doing, I think we chose two each.
Mhm.
just to keep the focus, because we could be here a really long time if we talked about all 12 and how they supported us in the situation that we were in. So, oh, go ahead.
And the other thing that I wanted to share is that I personally have, I stay away from picking favorite or most important traditions because they are all so very important to me. In certain circumstances, I need to look at these 2 or 3. And in other circumstances, I look at some others. But as we noticed in our relationship Venn diagram, for me, the traditions are all equally balanced. And you know, we selected a couple here to stay focused on, but the reality is that I try my best not to put one tradition more important over the other, because then I'm kind of pushing my will and saying, here's your graduation. This is A, B, and C. And that doesn't work for me anymore. So we would like to, let's take maybe about 10 minutes or so, and if we have anybody that wants to talk about a group conscience that has worked in their life, we'd love to hear from some of the people attending.
So raise your hand.
Jeremiah, did you want to do this portion?
Yeah,
Thank you.
looks like Jackie wants to share. So I'll unmute you. There you go, Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm codependent. I found it interesting in our group, all of us shared about working with children and allowing them to have a group conscience and finding their voice. That was interesting that we all shared that experience.
Thanks, Jackie.
Very cool.
Okay, everybody, raise your
Anybody
hand. Okay, raise your hand if you want to
Julia.
share.
There you go, Julia. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks. I'm Julia, codependent, and we just had like a really rich kind of, not exactly conversation, but cascade of shares, and like really thinking about different partnership, family, workplace experiences, and kind of thinking, I guess, I felt like what we were meditating on is how to bring more of the group conscience process into places where others are not part of the Coda Fellowship. That's, my mind's drawing a blank on the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. And John, you can go ahead and go.
Okay, I'm John. I'm a codependent. In our breakout room, we talked a bit about what the tradition means to each of us, and then one of the things we talked about is having, or I talked about, was coming up with a common goal and then getting everyone's perspective on how to get there. Then we changed it a bit, and automatically our higher power kicked in and directed that conversation elsewhere, where we could share our experience, strength, and hope with sponsorship. So it didn't just stick to tradition 2, we actually put it into practice. Just in our breakout room, and talked a little bit about sponsorship, finding a sponsor, and working with co-sponsors. So I think even even this breakout room group conscience was actually divinely inspired as well. So that's, we talked about getting our egos out of the way, and everyone that showed up in that breakout room left their ego on vacation, and we just had a good discussion. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, John. And Julie, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, y'all. This is Julie, Codependent. This is an awesome workshop. And, I work the steps so I don't commit suicide, and I work the tradition so I don't commit homicide. I had a situation where I went home to my family of origin, and it was Mother's Day weekend, and I had a movie that I wanted my mom to share with me. And she said, yeah. So on Sunday, Mother's Day came, and I was going to take the movie out, and my sister came over. And my mom got quiet, and my sister got quiet. And I created a resentment. I didn't include my sister in the group conscience. I left the room, and I recited the Serenity Prayer because I turned myself into the ultimate authority. So that's how I work the traditions outside of CODA. We need to be equal, that's what I'm aiming, equality in my relationships, even in the grocery store. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tammy, I'm going to unmute you, and you can share.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
Hi, Tammy.
Got me? Hi.
Yep.
So what I was thinking with the this group conscience out of CODA would be just as simple as wearing a mask. We've been asked to wear a mask, and I wear a mask for your protection. You wear a mask for my protection. And it can be just as simple as that. It doesn't have to be like this big, huge drama, or, I don't have to put a whole ton of thought into it. I can just be conscious of myself and you. That's kind of what I was thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Uh-huh.
And Susan, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm codependent. I teach fitness, and we just came back I just came back into working, and I was limited as to how many students I could have in class because of the distancing. When we first came back into class, we were not allowed to use the hand weights. But then after a couple of weeks into class, it was determined that the powers to be let us use the hand weights. Well, in my class, I do use the hand weights once a week, but I took a group conscience as to whether or not my students wanted to use the hand weights.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share screen
because
again.
if they
Right.
did want to
Are we
use
back
the
at the
hand weights,
beginning?
they would have to go into a
I guess
small
we'll find out.
room one
Yep,
by one,
we
and then
are.
they would also have to clean them.
Hey, give me just a second, and we're going to
a
get
few other
started
things,
again.
So we're on slide
it would
20.
take them a while, and they're older adults. So I asked them, I
current
said,
slide.
would you,
That didn't
what
go
do
where I
you
wanted,
want
but
to
that's
do?
okay.
No,
It is
fine.
up
We
to
should be
You
you,
got it?
or you could bring your own.
Okay,
And it
so we
was,
are going to
I
resume.
took a
Thank you
group
so much
conscience,
for coming
and
back.
they all decided to bring their own weights.
Basically, at this point, we've
And it
painted
was
the dire nature of
pretty
our physical
amazing
situation with
because
no water,
they
etc.
themselves
But
did
I think
that.
what was a bigger
And I
issue,
was
at least
just,
for myself,
I
was
don't know,
the spiritual battle that
it
was
was
going
amazing.
on for
I was
us.
very happy
And I will
with
go ahead and
what
speak
they
of mine
decided
and
to
then
do.
pass it over to
And I
Chris to
thought
speak
it
of
was a
his.
very,
Go ahead, will you
I
pop the
thought it was
first
a very
one?
smart idea.
So one of
And
my
I was very proud
battles
of
that
them.
I dealt with
Thank you for
spiritually
letting me
was
share.
being a burden to Chris.
Thanks, Susan.
Of the two of us, I'm the one that has a chronic health
of our
condition
time?
that
That
is
is
in
the
remission,
end.
but it
There's
flares up
nobody
and
else
it
with
can
their
be an
hand
issue.
raised.
And I was so frightened that I was slowing him down. And I remember turning to him and saying it over and over, I'm sorry, I'm so slow. I'm sorry, I'm not going faster. And it was a constant in my mind. Yeah, it was like that. So that was one of the battles that I went with. The other one was a fear of dying. At some point when we had no idea where we were, and no connection to anyone, we hadn't crossed paths with anybody. We didn't see any trail markers, which was another frightening thing. I was fairly convinced that we were going to die out there. And at some point, I will not lie to you, that my thoughts became rather obsessive about that. And we kept moving, and we kept moving along what we thought was a path. But over and over, I just kept thinking, I'm going to die out here. We're going to die out here. I'm never going to see my family again. I'm not going to see my sons. I'm not going to see my grandchildren. I've got a sister, a niece, and a nephew, and, you know, the list, and friends. Oh my gosh, my friends, because they today are my family of choice, in addition with, you know, the family that I have. And it was a battle. It was a battle to stay present in the moment with these thoughts going on for myself. Should I continue?
Sure. Now, on my side, you know, I'm sitting there and my codependency comes up with, I'm the responsible one. I'm the one who's educated, I'm trained, and I'm sitting there, and, you know, that self-judge definitely was kicking in for me, because, you know, the one part of my head said, yeah, we both decided about doing this. And the other part of my head was like, you're responsible. You should have done better. We shouldn't be on the edge like this. And my self-judge is extremely harsh. Go ahead. The big fear that I had of where we were was that possibility that Lisa might not be able to move forward, that she might get stuck. And then I'd have to make a choice. Should I continue to go find help and come back to get her? Or do I stay with her and try to figure out a different solution? And the choice of what to do under those circumstances was quite obsessive in my head. You know, one of the things about the area that we were in was, you know, we knew that they were called superstitious mountains or superstition mountains. We found out later that there's some bad mojo in that area. You had a friend that told you about that.
Yeah, so somebody who's a longtime resident of the area shared with us. He said, well, he shared with me, and he said, Lisa, if I'd known you were going to hike there, I would have told you to go somewhere else. Which was kind of, well, that's great. I didn't say anything, but on top of it, he let us know that many battles had taken place there, and that was what was understood. And in addition to that, there was also some rumor talk that some ritualistic type behavior had taken place out there. And so there was a lot of negative energy there. And for me personally, in hindsight, I recognize that what was happening for me was that I was picking up on a lot of negative and bad energy there. And that is something that fits in with my spiritual beliefs. I believe that there is a force of good in this world. I also believe that there's a force that's not good, that call it evil, call it negative, not a life force, but something opposite of that. And so I firmly believe that for myself, and I believe Chris had an agreement as well, that we experienced picking up on some of that kind of energy, and that really impacted what was happening for us. Excuse me. You're next.
And at this point, one of the other traditions that was very important came up and helped us to transition to a different way. The common welfare of Tradition 1, our common welfare should come first, and personal recovery depends upon Coda Unity. We had talked about that during some of our work with the toolkit. So one of the ways that this came into play while we were there in the wild and facing this situation, for me, I had to absolutely let go of that sense of responsibility. You know, that I'm the Eagle Scout. It's my business. It was my fault we're in here, and it's my responsibility to get us out. And I had to step away from that role, that hat of it's on me. I had to remember that it was about us. And I had to step back. It's like, okay, this is where we are in this moment. This is what I think. Where are you? What do you think we should do? What are the pros and cons from what you see? So for me, the Tradition 1 and recognizing that I needed to practice unity with Lisa, that was going to be important for us moving forward. And I'm oh God, did I make sure? It's like I shared with her that my experience is not an absolute end all. You have to tell me what you think, not based on my experience and not my resume. What do you think? Because I knew that Lisa had plenty of experience in nature that was going to be different than mine. And, you know, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm not as good when it comes to desert, where I knew Lisa had 20 years in Vegas, which is high desert. So for me, practicing Tradition 1 was stepping away from that role of leader and working together as a team.
So for me, Tradition 1 and unity manifested in standing united with no blame. I didn't get to point the finger at anybody. There wasn't anybody else, right? It was he and I. So I didn't get to point the finger at him and say, oh, you know, it's on you. And it could have been easy. It could have been. However, remembering Tradition 1, remembering the work we did in the toolkit about unity being an important piece of the relationship, it reminded me of what Coda unity means. And for me, what I learned over the years was that if we didn't have Coda unity as in Codependence Anonymous being united, if there's no unity, there's no Coda. And if we don't stand united, we stand divided and actually we fall. And so I was very aware of this concept early on in my recovery, and it was quite a natural thing to bring it into our relationship and into this situation, because the entire process, the entire time, it was never me making decisions, it was never Chris making decisions, it was both of us together. It was always consensus, it was always group conscience process. And because of that, even if the thought wanted to come in, what happened for me, but it was like, well, wait, we were in this together. When we decided to take that, you know, right instead of left, we both decided to go that way. It wasn't him going, I'm the dude, I know where to go, boom, let's go. It wasn't like that. And so when I could stand on that and rely on that, it took away any chance of me even wanting to blame, because in all honesty, I couldn't. And so I believe that for me, standing united, no blame, no finger pointing, helped us to work together instead of against each other, which in my estimation preserves energy, conserves energy, and allowed us to be able to focus on what really mattered, which was, to make it out of there. Or am I next? I am next.
Yep.
Yep.
And then we
Primary
go to
purpose.
primary purpose.
Yeah, primary purpose. So when we talk about primary purpose, Tradition 5 as a focus, we want to make this a topic of discussion. So we're going to talk a little bit and then turn it over to you in breakout rooms again to talk about this. But each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to other codependents who still suffer. And so the principle that is extracted from this for a relationship is primary purpose. And as Chris spoke about earlier, we spent the better part of a week, I'm going to say it was closer to 2, to be honest with you. And I still have my original notes from the whole process that we went to come to a primary purpose. We also made the decision that our primary purpose in its full form is really personal for us, and we decided we didn't want to share the whole thing, but we did want to share the bullet points or the main words that came up as a result of that. And as you can see, respect, I'll say it out loud because I know some people are joining by phone. Respect, protect,
support, and nurture.
And so for me, my primary purpose when I was out there in terms of Tradition 5, not only was it focusing on these 4 items here for the 2 of us, but it was about survival. It was keep moving, just keep moving. I can't stop. If I stop, then it's over. There's no chance. And I remember that came to me while we were walking, and I believe you acknowledged that we didn't know it at the time, but later when we had time to debrief and talk together, we realized that we both got the same message. Higher power, not coincidence, in my opinion. We both got the same message: keep moving. We couldn't stop. And for me, that became kind of a personal primary purpose that helped me to battle with some of the things that I was dealing with inside. I couldn't give up. I just could not give up. I'll pass it over to Chris now.
On my side, when I had that primary purpose, and we had been in the habit of sharing our primary purpose together on a daily basis. And when we were there and at risk, there are parts of our primary purpose that really came out. I mean, I needed to respect where Lisa's perspective and her experiences could help us. I was doing the best that I could to support her because I didn't know what struggles were going on in her head at that time. During the, afterwards, we were able to share some of our individual thoughts that were going on. I didn't know at the moment. We were conserving energy, so some of that conversation was not happening at the time, but that focus of being of support to Lisa was definitely in the forefront of my head. One of the choices that we made during that time, one of the times that we sat down, I made a suggestion to Lisa. We each had stuff that we were carrying. We started with some water. The water was mostly gone at that point. We had a tripod, which the Eagle Scout in me, I had a really fancy set of knots holding it, diagonal across one of the backpacks. But I made the suggestion that we combine the backpacks so that I could carry that, and then Lisa would have the flashlight. And I asked for her to be in front and look for the trail.
This did not go well for me. I balked at this. I will not lie to you. I said, no, 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 no. We're 50-50. I help carry. It's just as important. That's too much of a burden for him. And really what it was about for me as a woman, it was like, man, woman, woo, you know, and like maybe I couldn't handle it. I couldn't, you know, handle the load. And I immediately went to that place. So I will acknowledge that that was my history. That was what had been communicated to me for most of my life. You really can't see me right now, but I'm not a small woman, and I'm actually rather strong. I played sports, avid hiking, camping, a lot of that. I could almost say that it was, I was really upset about it, and I didn't want it to be that way. So I pass it back to Chris, who said,
at this point, one of the things that respect came out, I didn't tell her she was wrong. That's not my job. Okay, what I could do is say, okay, this is my perspective. There is a strain if you are up front by looking for the trail. There is a mental strain of staying focused on the rocks that we were stumbling across. We had one flashlight. We might have been able to get some more light from our phones, but we had one flashlight with us. So not only was she going to be looking for the obstacles that we could stumble across, she had to make sure that we were staying on the trail. And then if it did get rough, she needed to remember to stop and turn around and light my path so that I wouldn't stumble. And that is a mental strain. So from my perspective, it was splitting the load, the mental load of being responsible for illumination because the sun was down. There were clouds that were obstructing the full moon every once in a while. And then there's the physical load, which I was looking to pick up on. And it was not about me forcing her to recognize my truth. It was just sharing my experience and my perspective, and then waiting for her to consider what my perspective was.
which I did. I did. And it in the moment, it brought me comfort and peace that one, he didn't shame me or put me down. I didn't have to go through any of that. There was an acceptance of where I was at, shared where he was at. I found value and truth in that, and I recognized that he was right. And it was okay to say, you know what, you're right. This is important. And on another level, it was actually esteeming for me to be able to participate in a way that really did have value and meaning. And I will tell you that of the two of us, I was the only one who actually fell once. And I am very grateful for the bush that caught me, because had the bush not caught me, I would have gone down the side. And I recognize how important it was to divide up the duties and to acknowledge that they had equal importance. The other thing that we talked about, and I don't know if you remember, but he also said if he got tired, we could swap. It didn't happen, but that was okay. Just knowing that it could, knowing that it was an option, was important to me as well. I grew up in a very patriarchal home, and it would not have been that way, you know, where I came from. So to have that sense of equality was really important to me.
The primary purpose helped us to stay on the same page. We were not pulling against each other. Right. This was something where we recognized that coming together and using the primary purpose to guide us would help us get through what we were facing. And yeah. this is going to be where we break out again and give you guys a chance to talk a little bit more about your primary purposes, if you choose to. You know, the primary purpose for us helped us work together. And there are some places where primary purpose is clear, and then there are some times when it isn't. But because we were facing the situation we did, we chose to use this tradition. It helped us to get through it.
So at this point, we're going to break out into groups again. And for those that don't have a screen in front of them, let me read to you what the topic will be. How has primary purpose guided you to choose a course of action? This could apply either in a personal relationship or within a group. So at this point, we'll mute and allow our handy dandy poop. No, we don't have to stop sharing. We have to mute. Yeah, we'll have Lori help us. Thank you, Lori.
Sure.